The purpose of this video is to run through action blocks in DeltaV. It's basically to take a look at the actions that can be held inside it in terms of the structured text that can be created, and kind of the usefulness that's essentially that's there, right? So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use actions inside an action block to control basically a number of valves in this pump. I'm also going to look at the actual filling as well, right, of this Wi-Fi tank. So essentially, I'll get straight into it. So in the DeltaV Explorer, what I have is I have a Wi-Fi tank, and obviously then there was a kind of a loop that I showed there a few minutes ago. You basically, typical systems like this, purified water, Wi-Fi, you basically have some kind of a loop, and then you have customers that essentially kind of want to take from the loop as a circulation occurs, right? So essentially, that's not a batch operation. That is actually a continuous operation, right? So you've got this kind of continuous state, where the loop is basically moving around. And here we have, say, for example, a CIP system, or we have a mixing tank which wants to kind of take something out, right? So to get back into the actual the logic end itself, right? What I've done is I've created a kind of a control module, right? And then the control module is basically put into the mix. Here I've just simply called it logic simulation, just for the purpose of this demo, right? And there is no phase, there's nothing that's in with the actual piece of equipment at all, right? It just simply runs it, and it's constantly there. So when I open up that guy, this is effectively what I get here. All I have is essentially the block, and there's this guy called ind, and ind, when he's true, when he's enabled, it means whatever's inside actually runs, right? So essentially my preference in terms of programming, in general, is always, when it comes to industrial automation, it is without question, it's a I like structured text big time. That's kind of my mindset, right? And because I think you can do far more basically in it. But essentially, inside the action block, what I want to highlight is what you can do and what you can't do, right? And essentially, while you can loop to a certain extent, everything is kind of based on if, then, else if, or just simply if, right? And in this case here, as an example, what I'm doing is I'm comparing a string variable. Here I can see the string variable here itself. So if I go into this string variable, I just call them Wi-Fi distribution state, or Wi-Fi dis state. And then essentially there's a number of actual variables which I can take control of, which then themselves represent the actual set points, of a number of kind of valves basically in the system. So essentially the core thing is that when you're actually inside here, what you can do is you can compare to conditions. So you can actually do a little bit of maths if you want to as well. Like here, for example, in terms of the filling. So here, if the level sensor of the tank is less than 2000, then the filling valve will open. And here, say for example, if the filling valve is over 4000, if the actual level is over 4000 kilograms, basically, because that's what we have, or liter, sorry, in a particular tank, then essentially, you know what I mean, the actual filling valve will kind of turn off. So he essentially kind of runs and basically does his thing. And what I'll do is I'll kind of just show him live, basically kind of as I go, right? So what I'll do is I'll go online here, and no, I don't want to do that. So perfect. So he's online, right? And I can see that the actual system is encirculating. Here I have a small bit of VB on the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into stopped. So I click stopped. And what I can see is basically the items have turned off. And something that I kind of have on the side here is I have I have a live kind of system where you can see this here, these particular relays. This represents 30. And then we have 31, then we have 34, and then we have 35. So these particular guys here are representative of that. So say, for example, if I go into, we can see that there's 4002. That's very hard to make out there, but I promise you that's what it says, right? Essentially, I'll go into circulate, and here we'll see basically that these particular valves open. The drain valve here for the actual tank, and then basically to allow circulation this valve opens and then the pump opens. And if I go back, what I'll see is we've got these two relays that are open. This represents 35 here, and this guy represents this guy number 30. And then say, for example, what I'll do is I'll pretend maybe that the tank has gone very, very low. So essentially what I'll do then is I will go and I'll go into this particular level sensor here. I'm going to go into him, and what I'll do is I'll just put him at 1200. So we'll just pretend that that's what he is here. You'll see that the filling valve will open, and then you'll see that the relay that represents him, this represents 31 again. He basically has triggered and he's opened. I'll go in again, maybe I'll go over, so I'll go to 4002, give him a click. You'll see that the tank then itself is going to jump. He's going to have closed here, and then our old relay is basically going to have gone off. This guy that's there in particular. And just to do one final one then, again itself, what I'll do is I'll just literally just go, say for example, to drain, and I'll open the actual the guy himself here. Here you can see he's in circulate, and basically we'll just go to drain, and you can see that basically these guys have turned off. He's going down to drain at the moment. And if I go back to my if I go back to my control module, I can see that he's basically in drain. So essentially the action valve is very much, it's kind of if statements. You can do a kind of a loop in there as well to a degree, but that's kind of what it's used for. It's done for a lot of, in my opinion, kind of quick logic in a system before you get into the kind of like the proper sequential function chart logic. And it's also done for some form of calculations as well. You trigger the enable, and basically, you know what I mean, he does his thing, and then basically when you want him to stop doing whatever calculation is inside, you basically kill the enable on the outside until you want to perform that calculation again. Thank you very much.